what's up, friends? It's Sureshni Ryder. Hello, the host of All Accounting 4. And as usual, I'm joined in the house by Bee, who's from the Faculty of Accounting. We're always so excited to catch up with you on these sessions. And hey, big love. Thank you so much for all the love you're showing us on all of the social media streets. We see you. We love your comments. We love your suggestions. And we love that you're engaging with these conversations. If there's anything that you think we've missed out or you'd like for us to expand on, I'm sure Bee will agree. We're all ears. We'd love to learn a bit more about what you're going through as a student and what you like. And that's the whole premise of All Accounted For. You know, whether you're trying to balance your books or balance life, this whole session is about making it easier, making it palatable, making it snackable for you so that you get a better understanding of All Accounted For and accounting and the bigger pillars in accounting itself. We try to make it super, super easy. In the show, we're always looking at just different breakdowns and subsegments. One of them is called Bottom Line Bulletin, where we actually take a look at what is happening in the industry and we cover the latest in accounting news. We do something called Credit Where It's Due, and if you've never seen the show before or you've never been part of the platform, Credit Where It's Due is where we showcase and profile somebody who is a chartered accountant, so you get a better feel for somebody who's actually studying what you studied or what you're currently studying, and to see how they've managed to pivot in the real industry life. And then finally, Ledger Lowdown. That is where we unpack those different pillars of accounting. It's a corporate segment where we evaluate an industry and basically try to understand, how it works. How do they make money? And then, of course, how it links it to your studies. Today, we're going to be looking at the private health sector. Da-dum-tsh. This is a big one. This is probably one of the most controversial industries because there's so much to complain about, but also there's a lot to understand, and there's so many takeaways that we want to talk about. So B, let's start straight into what the National Consumer Commission, which is the NCC, they launched this crackdown on expired and unsafe goods in South Africa. And if I'm not mistaken, just this very week, spaza shops are being closed down in South Africa because of expired noodles. So many kids in South Africa have unfortunately died because they've eaten something that's expired, not knowing or unbeknownst to them. But this is what happened with the inspections in the Limpopo's Capricorn district. The operation, supported by multiple government agencies, uncovered this widespread non-compliance with many expired products like baby food and snacks that were removed off the shelves. Bring me up to speed. What exactly happened here with the NCC?
So I think you summed it quite well. I think maybe to just get a bit of context about what the NCC is actually trying to do here is that if we look at the National, or rather the Consumer Protection Act, right, it basically says that everyone has the right to safe and quality goods. And if you now think about these puzzle shops that are selling either stuff that's expired, stuff that is fake, and therefore detrimental to our health, they would then be contravening this act. And so that's why you would have municipalities doing these audits as part of their kind of health portfolio to then kind of clamp down on these puzzle shops, especially in rural areas where these issues are much more pronounced. So you're looking at even bottled water, for example, where it's not necessarily the original one aqua that you could find at a Pick and Pay, whatever the case is, or even medicines like the fake Medlimin, fake Grandpa. So all of those things actually impact us as consumers. And it's actually quite interesting that Section 61 of the Consumer Protection Act actually says that in the event that you get injured or get sick, you can actually claim against the supplier for damages and injuries. So this is such a kind of enlightening part about this to say that, the reason they might be able to get away with some of these things is because we as consumers may not even be doing our part. So if you do know of a puzzle shop or a place that is not selling the right quality goods, you can actually take it upon yourself to report them because what they're doing is illegal.
I think it's because people have a misconception about whistleblowers, and they think that people who are whistleblowers are just there to cause trouble. Not at all, especially when it involves children or it involves your health or the fact that somebody could die from eating something that's expired. Then you need to stand up for your community, and that's why you're given that platform. You can be anonymous, you can report it. It's not about taking business away from somebody. It's about making sure that the community survives. So I'm really glad that the NCC, also, they're ombudsmen. They're basically acting on our behalf too. So understand their role and understand that there's great opportunity to make change. Speaking of change, one of the things we love on the show is celebrating people who have made a pivot, people who are trailblazers and captains of industry, and they all started from, some of them, such humble beginnings. The stories that you've been sharing about the people that we profile on Credit Where It's Due is just amazing, and I'm so excited to read about Msizi Gwala, who is the project director for enabling competencies at SAICA. So Msizi Gwala is the project director for enabling competencies at SAICA, where he leads initiatives in business acumen, decision making, relational skills, and digital competencies. His role reflects a strong commitment to people development and progressive change. And then obviously, we're going to go back to his history and where it all started. What are some of the key takeaways to Msizi's journey?
So I think with regard to Msizi, what's particularly important rather about his journey is just how he's been able to leverage his accounting skills to kind of create change within the public sector. And that's not something that you kind of see a lot. I mean, as you study to become a CA, whatever the case is, you tend to think about you and just how much money you can make out there in corporate. Not a lot of people come back to these noble professions like your education or public service. And Msizi has been able to do that. And I think that is quite impressive. And I think also the fact that he then he chose to work at an institution like UKZN, which is a historically disadvantaged institution, which, these institutions do struggle to kind of attract the right skilled people because they're in such rural areas. But not only does the institution benefit, but also the students who are then taught by people like Msizi, because now they get to kind of see themselves reflected in Msizi. We always say representation matters, and I think it's so, so important that for those CAs that they're able to give back in this particular manner.
Oh, I'm so proud of Msizi. And of course, UKZN is where my radio dream actually started. So to see that journey come into full circle, I think that's so important when you're able to, you've benefited from being in the community, you've studied within the community, and then you come back, you go out there in the big world and you come back and you do it again. That is a full circle moment. So well done to Msizi Gwala. Hey guys, don't forget to go find him, go research a little bit more about the work that Msizi does. And people like that are truly inspiring. And maybe he has some key takeaways for you as somebody who's studying accounting. Msizi Gwala. So this is all accounted for. One of the practices we discuss is the ledger lowdown, and we look at three elements or elements that basically divide or shape the topic that we're talking about. We wanted to talk about the private medical sector, and the private healthcare sector is a serious one. It's something that has so many moving parts. So we're going to break it down for you in the ledger lowdown. We're going to give you some facts and figures. We're going to tell you how it makes money, and then we're going to help you and figure out how it links to your studies. We're going to look at the auditing perspective. We're going to look at the ethical perspective, and of course, taxation. Private healthcare sector. Do not be afraid when I use those words. You will know that when you get to an emergency situation and you arrive at a hospital and you've broken a leg, and the question at the front desk is like, they can see your leg is broken, but they're like, hi, do you have a medical aid card? Or, which plan are you with? And it's frustrating because you feel like, I'm stressed. Can you see I've broken my leg? That should be the first question. But there is a process to follow, and when you arrive at these hospitals, there's just an understanding, okay, do you have this medical aid card so we can get you in the system and give you the care that you've been paying for? Let's talk about the facts and figures about the private healthcare sector. I believe it serves 16% of the population, and that equates to about 9 million people.
So the private healthcare industry is massive. It has an estimated market size of about 200 billion rands, and the ones who make up kind of the So it's made up of usually your private hospitals, your private clinics, as well as your specialists. Those are the ones that account for the largest share of this revenue. And I think, as you were speaking, your example earlier about medical aid, the majority of private healthcare is actually funded through medical aid schemes, right? So you do get like a small number of people that do pay their way via cash. at these hospitals or at those institutions, but majority of them would actually then be using medical aid to fund those medical costs. And then in South Africa, the medical schemes kind of area is also highly competitive. We have about 76 medical schemes operating in the country, with the largest open medical schemes. Open medical schemes just basically means that it's open to the general public. The largest for those being your Discoveries, your Momentum, and Bonitas. And then your closed medical schemes would be something like GEMS, which is for government employees, or POLMED, which is for police officers, as an example.
Right. Now, when you talk about servicing like 9 million people in the country, then my question begs me to ask is how do you think they make money then? Where does this money come from these private medical schemes?
So they make money through a variety of streams. The first one being the obvious one, your patient fees and payments. So that would be your direct payments where a patient accesses private healthcare or these facilities, and they would then pay directly to the private institution, and they would be then paying for their consultations, whatever procedures that they do, and they would then pay, like I said, either in cash. Or for those that do have medical aid, sometimes medical aid doesn't cover everything. So then you would have to kind of pay that co-payment from your own pocket. And then you have then a significant portion of this revenue then stemming from your medical schemes. And then you also get your hospital and clinic revenues. That would be your inpatient services where you kind of go to give birth, have a surgery, intensive care, things like rehabilitation, nursing care, therapies, those kind of services. Or you get your outpatient services such as when you go and have a consult, or you do like diagnostic tests like your imaging, lab work, and that sort of thing. And then you also have your pharmaceutical sales, where some of these private hospitals would then kind of own or operate pharmacies within their premises, and they would then make additional revenue from that. And then you also get your administrative and management fees, where the people that are then billing these medical aids are kind of charging a fee to say, look, I am claiming this, it cost me this much of my time, whatever the case, therefore I'm going to bill the medical aid or the patient this much money just to have facilitated that administration. And then the last one would be your cross-border services. So you know how in Turkey, like Turkey has basically become the go-to for all cosmetic surgery.
And Brazil, babes. Brazil
Yes,
and Mexico.
Brazil.
Yeah.
And Mexico.
Yeah.
And then South Africa is also, up there because we have actually some of the best doctors in the world. And so people then come to South Africa to kind of get these specialized surgeries, and a handful do also come for kind of cosmetic procedures. And this is also a very lucrative market.
I was actually going to add to that because I think most of you know by now that I'm now based in the US. And what we've found here is that it's a very tricky medical system that you want to navigate. And something simple as an example, my husband needed a dental implant. And he had an amazing doctor, Dr. Furloop, who's in Centurion. And he even contemplated getting onto a flight from the United States all the way back to South Africa because it A, would be cheaper, and the technique that doctor used is not the same technique that's used here. And he thought instead of changing the entire set of the implant the one implant that is the issue, he would rather do that because we have such phenomenal doctors here. But it is happening. People, want to have the Brazilian butt lift, or they want to get Botox, or they want to get a tummy tuck. That is a reality of the cross-border services. But also, when you spoke about in-house pharmacies, when it comes to the private healthcare sector, it's like you're paying for convenience, and that's what happens. That's the differentiator. Yeah. It's because at this hospital, it's a one-stop shop. There's the pharmacy. There you can quickly access the gynae while you're at it. So if you're, a parent or somebody becoming a parent, instead of going to a GP, then going to a separate gynae, and then going to an obstetrician who's going to deliver the baby, or seeing somebody in the natal clinic, sometimes those private healthcare facilities have everything in one go. So you're going from floor to floor, and that's I believe is why
it's like a mall, basically.
Correct.
A mall for healthcare.
Yeah, a healthcare shop. So that was pretty interesting to know how the money is made. And of course, your premiums. You are paying premium for these services, and people often complain about, oh, it's my gap cover. I didn't have enough for the hospital stay. Please look at your plans. Look at all the line items if you go in for an operation. They're going to charge you for every swab, every cotton ball, everything. Okay, so I think what talking about this private healthcare sector should make you more alert to what you're paying for and the services you've asked for and the services that you have received. B, as always, we try to bring it back to the students. We try to figure out what is the link then to studies with regards to IFRS and the principles and standards that apply.
So I think with IFRS, there's actually two that I want to discuss. I think the easier one would be your IFRS 10, which deals with consolidated financial statements. So if you think about the healthcare groups within South Africa, your Netcare, what's the other one? Mediclinic? Is it Mediclinic? Yes.
Yeah.
So they basically have subsidiaries like across the country. And so they would then prepare a consolidated set of financial statements for that, which the students are well aware of. But I think an interesting one would be IFRS 15, which we've actually spoken about, in the different kind of episodes. But there was actually an interesting article that I found that speaks to IFRS 15 to say, for example, if we think about the fact that, like you were saying earlier, so you're lying on the side of the road, you've had an accident, maybe you don't even have your wallet with you. Now this ambulance comes, they pick you up and then they take you to Mediclinic. First of all, they don't know that you will be able to settle that bill. They don't even know if you have a job or if you have medical aid. And so the question then becomes, okay, fine, but what is then the possible transaction price? And this is something that IFRS 15 speaks about, essentially saying that you need to determine what the transaction price is. So given the fact that fixing a leg does not always kind of follow the same procedure or have the same kind of complications every single time. So how much will that bill end up costing?
Oh.
That is a consideration that
That
is a consideration
that changes things.
that the healthcare that the healthcare industry would need to think about. And so the question then becomes, for example, even after you've kind of established what the true cost of the surgery or fixing this person is, a person can still come and say, yeah, can I please negotiate? I can't really afford this, right? And then they can actually knock down the price. Or a medical aid can say, we're not covering this code that you've built. And therefore, it's kind of also going to go down. So the question then becomes, is that to be accounted for, or that adjustment, should it be accounted for as a concession? That is, do you then reduce the amount of revenue that you initially recognize? Or is it essentially a bad debt, right? And so that is something that they would then need to think about. And also now, to just add to this example that I was talking about, now this person is lying there. We don't know if they have a job or whatever the case is. And so the question then says, in order for you to recognize revenue in your financial statements, the standard says it needs to be probable that you're going to get the money. So now you treat B for her broken hip or whatever the case is, and then B can't afford it once you've actually fixed them. So the question then becomes, should we even be recognizing this as a revenue? Is that probability, because it's so uncertain whether or not you're going to get this money back, should we then essentially be recognizing revenue or not? So I thought this was such an interesting article about kind of the specifics that these companies within the healthcare industry have to deal with when it comes to IFRS 15.
Because it's not one size fits all, right? And so if you've broken your leg, you might have an allergic reaction to the medicine. You might have that.
Absolutely.
I might not have it. So that's where these little costs can completely change the game. Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for showing me the links to studies and students. I hope you get that. Don't forget to pop us comments. We'd love to hear from you, especially if there's something you're not understanding or you'd like for us to unpack further. One of the things we discuss in All Accounted For, especially for students, is management accounting, strat, and finance. And we look at key principles within management accounting, strategy, and finance that apply to the private healthcare sector. Walk me through some of those.
Cool. So we've spoken before about activity-based costing. I think it was when we were discussing airlines, to just say a hospital would essentially need to make sure that they allocate the different costs in accordance with the different services, so that the pricing strategies are properly informed by what costs or how much it actually costs to keep a particular division open, right? And I think another one that I was just thinking of is to say, for example, how do you know, if you're going to start a hospital, how do you know how big your hospital needs to be? And this is where students would have learned about the concept of financial modeling, right? To say that you need to essentially build a model to see where this kind of endeavor would be the most profitable. And so in building your model, you would look at things such as, for example, your revenue projection. So what are your expected patient volumes? What services are you going to offer? What does the pricing model look like? What is the breakdown of the operational costs? So like your staffing, for example, your medical supplies, facility maintenance, and what other capital expenses would you then kind of look at as well? So if we think about what technology or equipment do you have to invest in, what of hours do we have to kind of upgrade as well? And you also do something called sensitivity analysis, which the students would be aware of. It's basically where you're assessing how a change in a variable would then affect your financial outcome. So for example, what would happen if the patient numbers drop by, say, 10 or by 100, or if we drop the number of beds in our hospital by, say, 10 or 15 or whatever the case is. So those would be important principles to then look at that would then inform how you determine what size hospital to kind of have. And then another point, which is your strategy. So private hospitals would then adopt a differentiation strategy by offering, for example, a specialized service, a state-of-the-art facility, or superior patient care, or something that you touched on earlier, right? Where you say that they could essentially offer a one-stop shop where they make sure that they have kind of all of the important specialties within kind of the same group of hospitals. Then you don't have to be going there for this and coming back for that. So that's those are some of the concepts that the students would be aware of.
Right. It's like we're bringing back to the conversation about convenience. Now, when you're speaking about these innovations that hospital needs to have and keeping in mind, how we keep moving forward and either getting bigger or why we're getting smaller or just making sure that the hospital provides enough. My brain is thinking, well, how much is this going to cost? And then I look at the bill. I want to see the tax. I want to know, how do we get tax? Because now I'm just intrigued about tax nowadays. That's when I'm like, okay, you're taking this money from me. Tell me how you're getting taxed. I want to understand. How does the corporate income tax work for private medical healthcare sector?
Well, so the good news is that the government essentially takes about 20% of
They do?
so rather 27% of that, right? So they're taxed at the corporate income tax rate of 27%. And when it comes to that, medical services in South Africa are generally exempt from that. But then your private healthcare providers would then pay VAT on other taxable supplies, such as your pharmaceuticals, your medical equipment, and other non-medical services. And I think also just to speak on capital gains tax as well, seeing that they use such complex and specialized machinery, when they do essentially then sell these assets to maybe private healthcare providers or whatever the case is, then that would attract a capital gains tax.
How interesting. So we were discussing from the very outset of All Accounted For is that I don't have, when I was in school, I didn't take accounting as the course that I was going to be interested, but now I'm so intrigued. And then it got me thinking, if I did ever take this course, auditing would be the subject that I would love. I think I would love forensics. I would love auditing because I would love to see the ethical issues being balanced because that's very important to me. When we started this conversation, we spoke about something simple as noodles and the fact that children have died eating noodles that were not monitored in terms of expiry dates, etc. And for me, that's like a red flag in my brain. Like, what did this company do right? How do we get them back on track? What did they do correctly? Not. So let's look at the auditing and the ethical issues that stand when it comes to the private healthcare industry. I think it will read like a laundry list of people who have complaints that they went to a private hospital and this is what they expected and this is what they got, So if we look at the compliance and regulations, healthcare providers are subject to really strict regulations, including those related to patient care and standards, medical billing practices. It becomes an issue when you have to pay X amount of money, when why am I paying for a swab? You start to question things when your pocket suddenly looks like, I can't afford that procedure anymore. And of course, data protection. We don't even think about data protection. People go in, I don't want people to know about whatever health conditions because it could impact the job that I have or etc. Can you walk me through something even when it comes to POP here or how auditors have to ensure compliance in this particular industry?
So compliance within that space would be massive in this case. And so I think the auditors would then look at whether or not they're being compliant with these regulations, right? So what controls do they have within the business to protect company or rather patient data? who gets access to, say, a patient file. So someone who cleans at a hospital versus a doctor should not be having kind of the same level of access. That kind of goes without saying. And so they would be looking at such controls to say, you know, how does this company make sure to kind of comply with these requirements? And I think also another thing which we spoke about when we talked Big Pharma was just conflicts of interest within the healthcare space, where you're now a healthcare provider, but you now have a financial tie to either a pharmaceutical company or some other medical device manufacturer. Now you're pushing this product to the patient when it's not necessarily kind of the best option that they have available. And so, like, where's the ethics there? And I think also another thing, talking about ethics, is with regard to medical schemes fraud, where healthcare providers would charge you an arm and a leg, or they would actually charge you for things that they didn't even do. So now you're getting charged for extra gloves that they never used, or
Hey, I'm willing to
or
bring my
some
own
other
things
scan.
into the room. I'm just saying. I've got a whole
Bring your own
container of
glove, your own needle,
plasters,
everything.
cotton. What do you need? Cotton balls sold. What else do you need? If you need antiseptic wipes, I've got enough masks. But I understand. See, this is again, we bring back the
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
about being able to be alert and aware of when you receive a bill, or even when you accept a specific policy or a medical aid scheme. Please ask questions. Don't just take for granted that this is what the hospital sold me, and then, oh, but they said it's fine, you know? And what you bring up is so
You
important.
must
That
audit your bill, hey? You must
Yeah,
audit your
okay,
bill.
there we go.
Yeah.
Because you can dispute it. You can
Um,
say, you can
You
dispute
can
it.
dispute it, yes.
Friend, I'm going to bring
Yes. I
receipts.
mean,
And what
if
I'm
you don't
saying,
do it, if you don't do it, the medical aides are also going to do it for you, because they actually have people that are trained to kind of look at the links of the thing that you admitted for and the subsequent care that you received, right? So I'm not going to walk in with a broken leg and then there's a charge for an abdominal sauna. Like, those kind of two things don't really
got
kind of
you.
speak to each other. So the medical aides are there to protect their bank, okay? They're not just going to get bamboozled by all of these private healthcare providers. But I think another thing that I just wanted to add was to say, you know, I think during COVID, we also saw problems with regard to just access to facilities when the public kind of institutions were flooded. And then you couldn't go to a private kind of institution, even when they may have had beds. And so that speaks to, I suppose, a deeper societal problem within South Africa's context, because it's such an unequal country. But, you know, things like that with regard to pricing, as well as availability of critical care resources, when these private institutions kind of have them and they just kind of don't want to share them. I understand that they're also running a business, so they can't just be, you know, giving stuff willy-nilly. But that is also, I suppose, an ethical dilemma that we have. And I think I just wanted to say kudos to the private healthcare groups in South Africa in particular. They got, for their most recent financial years, they got unqualified audit opinions, which basically means that everything that they're saying is happening in their financial statements is basically what's happening in the ground. And I think that is absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's commendable. We want good stories. We want feel good things. We also want to know that things are working, you know, and especially when it comes to our healthcare. It won't matter to you until you break an ankle and you are lying on the side of the road unconscious and somebody has to cart you to a hospital, and then what? What must happen then? So these are the things to be aware of. And I love that you're also saying that the medical schemes or the medical aid plans are very cognizant of what you are going in for and what you are paying for. So I think you guys can work cohesively in saying, hey, I went for this particular procedure. Should I have gotten this? Is this okay? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to money and the money that you're spending. And we want to make sure that your own bottom line is also protected. Bee, thank you so much as always. I love the industries that you have profiled. We've looked at banking. We've now looked at the private healthcare sector. We've also looked at the airline industry. This is fascinating for students. And hey guys, we've been uploading videos on YouTube. There's shorts, there's reels. We're also on Instagram and TikTok. Please have a look, see. And if there are any questions, please send our way. Pop a comment in the comment box and just go, hey, how does this work? Or I have a question about IFRS, and I'm sure Bee will be very happy to connect with you and of course to help you out. Have a good one, guys. Thank you so much again. All Accounted For, proudly brought to you by Boston Media Broadcasts.